Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on this Casambi webinar, joined with eldoLED in partnership. This is actually focused, so it's the main topic is actually designing a luminaire for human-centric lighting. This is actually a two-part webinar that we've done. So we did the first webinar a few weeks ago, which was focused on specifying human-centric lighting. And this one is actually focused for fixture manufacturers. So it's actually designing a luminaire for human-centric lighting and what considerations need to be taken into account. I will start with some housekeeping. So we have 1 hour scheduled for this webinar. We've got roughly 40 minutes of presentation time. Following that, we'll have the Q&A session, live Q&A session. So we'll have around 20 minutes at the end. Hopefully, we can get through all the questions. If not, then we will compile a list of all the questions that come through during this time, and we will ensure to get back to you as well. Okay, so with that, we are joined actually live with Mark and Stefan, sorry, in Netherlands at eldoLED. So Mark is the Director of Product Marketing, and Stefan is the Senior Technical Sales Manager. So with that, I would like to go into the next slide and show you a brief agenda of what we're going to do. So first off, we have a brief introduction. We've got covering which eldoLED type of driver that you're going to need. What is the LightShape technology? What does it do and how does it work? Looking at designing color consistency, and then also combining Casambi and eldoLED in terms of the programming and looking specifically towards human-centric lighting. Following that, we'll have a look at the Casambi partner ecosystem. What additional benefits do you get on top of the hardware components that you've already chosen? Then we'll obviously go into the 20 minutes at the end for the Q&A. As a starting point, I would like to maybe recap here is why we've chosen human-centric lighting. And this is really more of a global trend that we're seeing here in the world. And they're really focused upon three main topics. The first one being digitalization. Everything is moving more towards technology. People, expectations are changing. They want more added value coming from the technology. They would like user experience to be at the core of all the fundamental developments. Following this, we also have sustainability. So ensuring, looking at the world of climate change, ensuring what we're doing now is also positively impacting into the future. And also then how do we combine these two together in terms of the actual well-being of the people? And this is the real sort of focus here in terms of lighting. We can look at the sustainable development goals and also the different certification bodies that are coming out, such as LEED, BREEAM, and the WELL building standards, which you can actually see here, which I've listed. With this, then I would like to take it over and introduce over to Mark and to Stefan.
Many thanks, Christian, for this introduction, and of course for the opportunity to be here together today in this webinar, where we will talk about the combination of eldoLED and Casambi to do human-centric lighting. And while we are switching the screens here, let's first do a quick personal introduction. So next to me, Stefan Weideven.
Thanks for introducing me, Mark. My name is Stefan Weideven. I work for eldoLED a little over 4 years as a senior technical sales manager, and I'm helping our OEM customers and project guys all in the field implementing our eldoLED LED drivers in combination with our Casambi Bluetooth modules in such a way that we can make a fantastic ecosystem in the end solution. And next to me indeed is Mark Kramer.
Yeah, so I'm with eldoLED, responsible for the product marketing. And running around in this company for quite some years with an engineering background. So let's first start with looking a little bit or introducing for this audience eldoLED, right? So maybe not all of you is full aware of what kind of company eldoLED is, right? So and we are a driver manufacturer. So we develop and manufacture LED drivers for lighting systems. And we focus really on that with quality of light. So quality of light is at the core of what we do, right? And well, we said, okay, what defines quality of light, right? Because quality of light means many different things for different people. So we set basically a set of requirements from a driver perspective to focus on quality of light. And that's what you can see here in this visual, where we can start talking about dimming or about flicker safe dimming, or about different form factors to fulfill your application and deliver on that promise of LED lighting from consistency perspective. Well, these are basic elements, but for now, we talk about human-centric lighting, which I would say is the next step if you start talking about dimming or color control or anything else.
Yeah, color mixing is basically dimming two channels. So it is not dimming one channel, but it's dimming two channels in such a way that we get the right perception of either color temperature and intensity levels. But in essential, it is still dimming, just pronounced and controlled in a different way.
Yeah, and we do that with, well, I would say being controls agnostic to all these different control standards or systems that are out there, where Casambi is one, right? So for us, Casambi, especially I would say in Europe and the Asian regions, is definitely our go-to market for wireless control in this play field. So on the driver side, right, so we really focus on the high performance drivers, focusing on that quality of light. And we do that with a full scale of drivers in a portfolio, from standard dimming to 1%, dim to dark, or multiple channels in architectural entertainment type of applications with DMX.
Yeah, there is no such thing as the best driver. I mean, the best driver is either defined on size or on power level or on the amount of LED outputs. There's no one driver that fits everything. So you need a portfolio of drivers to cover the needs. And Casambi in this case is the preferred control solution for our human-centric lighting approach. And the only thing that it requires from a driver perspective is a two-channel LED driver. So a dual drive, as we call it, right, Mark?
Yes. So, and as being one of these ecosystem partners for Casambi, we would like to talk today about, okay, what's that Casambi ready solution that we can offer to do color tuning, to do human-centric type of applications, or standard stuff, and what other options are there, and in the end, how do you connect them together? How do you program them, right? Yeah. And without showing that in a live environment here, we go through those high-level steps. And we can reference you to more material to go in more detail.
Exactly.
So first of all, let's start with why that combination, right? Why that combination is so crucial to do eldoLED and Casambi in this space.
There are not that many two-channel drivers out there in the market. And to do tunable light, you need at least a two-channel driver.
At least two channels.
At least two channels, indeed. So given the fact that there are not that many two-channel drivers out there in the market, eldoLED is, especially in the human-centric lighting approach, a preferred brand for LED drivers. And there are also not that many human-centric lighting control systems out there in the market that offer the flexibility of creating that human-centric lighting schemes directly by the end user, I would say. And that's the reason why Casambi is often
leading that effort.
Leading that effort, indeed. And making the combination between those two brands, which are often specified in the market, we're capable of bringing a solution from a controls perspective all the way down to the LED light output. And the only thing we need there is a luminaire manufacturer that provides a luminaire that is capable of having two-channel control or two-channel LED luminaire in essential. And then we can make the complete solution with only those brands.
Yeah. So, but just because you mentioned already two channels, and that's, I think, which comes back really good on this slide, right? So it's not about changing that color of a single LED or of two LEDs. So doing really human-centric approaches, you have to manage that consistency. You have to manage the color tuning from luminaire to luminaire in a consistent way.
Yeah, and if the luminaires are the same, it is not that hard. I mean, if you do it consistent on one, you can do it also consistent on many if they're all the same. But then practically they are never the same. It is either multiple type of luminaire, so a downlight and a panel light or
Yeah.
multiple brands in the same environment. But from a perspective, I always expect them to be the same. And it is not so natural as you would think when you start developing and designing your application. Practically, there are a lot of concerns where you need to take in account to do it properly, that what you actually expect to get from your control application is actually the LED light that you're going to perceive in your environment. And that is not complex, but there are some steps that you need to take in account to do that one time right without having to tweak or to tune anything.
Anything in the field,
Yeah,
because
indeed.
it was listed already. So shipping those, say, pre-programmed units or pre-programmed luminaires into the field is that great benefit. And having that control in the luminaire without doing that configuration in the field.
Indeed. In my house and in your house, it's not that hard to commission 5 luminaires and to set the profiles correctly within the application and to tweak on the light output. But if you're doing it on a large scale and you need to implement 1,000 luminaires, you don't want to do that 1,000 times the same step.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why designing for success means having the right preparation on the driver side and on the Casambi side, and bring that solution in the market that no one else has to touch a single button to do it right. That's what this webinar is all about.
So let's just say, do you remember this one, right? And it's something that we'll go back to the webinar we did last month, indeed, about specification of human-centric lighting with eldoLED and Casambi, right? And this visual came up, right, where the 4 different painters are in the end the 4 different engineers defining or designing a luminaire for a certain color temperature or in a certain temperature range.
Yeah.
And what you will get, you get 4 different colors of purple.
Yeah, because they use 4 different type of LEDs, and sometimes they even use 4 different brands of LED drivers.
Yeah, so let's take a look at what can we offer to solve this issue, right? And to make sure that the engineer is designing the luminaire in such a way to deliver on consistency.
Yeah, well, there are multiple ways of achieving it. You have the traditional way, and you have the more Casambi-enabled, Casambi-ready designs, I would say.
Let's start with the traditional way, right? So from a hardware perspective, it's using a standard driver with a standard open protocol like DALI or 0 to 10, and connecting it to one of the ASD units of Casambi, the Bluetooth radio.
Yeah, and if we talk about human-centric lighting, the 0 to 10 volt is not that applicable because you need multiple control channels,
so
which is not available in the analog way, but is definitely available in the DALI way. And where Casambi says we're following that DALI 2 standard, you can use any DALI 2 driver available in the market. You connect them together, you're matching the profiles, and it should work. Because we stick to that interoperability standard, which we're using DALI 2 there as a reference, and that should work out of the box. But that means that you need to prepare the units and the drivers in the same way. Next to that, you have a lot of Casambi-enabled solutions, drivers, where the radio module is integrated into the LED driver, but you hardly see them in 2-channel or even more channels. So the tunable white is often still done with a traditional CBU ASD from Casambi in combination with a DALI 2 tunable white LED driver, often controlled through DALI device type 8 indeed.
Yeah, and so as eldoLED as being one of the ecosystem partners for Casambi, we offer that Casambi ready solution as well.
Yeah.
And Christian will talk more about that ecosystem and the benefits of that. But in the end, it's a full umbrella or a portfolio of different brands and different products that are Casambi ready and can be hooked up in that network.
You can compare it with a traditional solution. The only difference is that in this case you're using a Casambi enabled Bluetooth module, and instead of that it speaks DALI, it speaks our LED code protocol between the radio module and the eldoLED dual drive for human-centric lighting. So in essential it's the same, but the communication protocol is a little bit different, which is an eldoLED communication protocol. But in the end, you ensure yourself that you make yourself an easier solution because it is only that 2-wire interface where LED code is designed around. So that makes it fairly easy, I would say.
So different configurations there, right? That we can offer depending on the application, depending on type of sealing, to have that radio in the right location.
Yeah, so we have the traditional one with the integrated antenna. We have a version with the external antenna that you can mount freely within your luminaire behind the reflector or behind the LED lens or whatsoever. And we even have a standalone unit that you can push in the ceiling if you want your optimum reception from a Bluetooth connectivity perspective. But they're all powered in the same way. 2 wires which hook up to every eldoLED driver in general. And that combination makes it a Casambi ready design.
Yeah, because you touched already on LED code. So can you tell a little bit more about that in detail?
LED code is something that eldoLED's already offering from day one. Every eldoLED driver is equipped with a LED code interface, which you can most of the times recognize by the yellow and the brown terminal on the LED driver. We use it to program a driver, we use it to configure the driver, we use it to test the driver in the factory as well. So that port has always been on the drivers from day one. And that enabled us, once the Bluetooth modules became available, to design one single Bluetooth module that could hook up to that portfolio of eldoLED drivers that was already available for many years. And by offering one component, all of a sudden, all our products became Casambi ready. And that is a huge advantage over the traditional integrated options, where the offering is fairly limited to 1 or 2 power sizes and 1 or 2 form factor availabilities in the market. And that's the reason why eldoLED is very popular in combination with those LEDCO 2 Bluetooth modules that we are offering indeed.
Yeah, so I can have the full portfolio of drivers hooking up the radio, so I can use that driver for other purposes as well, or combine it with that radio.
Yeah. The OEM can make a luminaire, they can integrate the LED driver, they can sell it as a dolly driver, they can sell it with a 0 to 10 volt driver, and they can sell it with a Casambi enabled solution on the same certification. And that makes it very easy because it's just plugging in a 2-wire interface without changing any high voltage wiring.
No line voltage.
No line voltage, no mains involved, no certification impact. You can simply ship that same unit in the market as a Casambi controlled luminaire. And that is a huge advantage from an OEM perspective. Then there's something else which is very important on our Bluetooth modules. We offer them pre-programmed, which means if you integrate that Bluetooth module into your fixture in the assembly phase, you don't have to connect your Casambi application, select the right mode, because they're already programmed, rebranded with an OEM logo and icon on our radio module in such a way that you only need to connect them and you can put it in the box and ship it in the field. And it all of a sudden is showing up in the network as an OEM rebranded luminaire.
Yeah, that's where you personally are involved, right?
That's where I help.
Helping the customers from a technical sales perspective.
And that's the difference between our living rooms and those huge projects, because that's saving a lot of time for the end user that needs to do the commissioning, and also from an OEM perspective, that they don't have to commission that all in the factory where they assemble the luminaires.
Okay, so very good. So that's the hardware story. That's how to get to that solution. Let's now look at, how from a system perspective, how do I enable that human-centric lighting, right? I need the controller, I need the driver and the radio, which is connected to the luminaire or to the LEDs inside the luminaire. Yeah. So Casambi is the language, the protocol that talks to the driver through the radio and send a command like go to a certain intensity level, go to a certain color temperature. What's the driver doing with that? And I see LightShape mentioning there, right? Yeah. So I would like to go a little bit further on what does LightShape in the driver and what's the benefit to the engineer using LightShape? You
touched the language where Casambi is speaking to the driver. But in the end, the luminaire is responding on drive current. No current is no light, and enough current is, I would say, enough light. I mean, and everything in between is changing the intensity. So the driver translates that control set point that is offered by Casambi to the right drive current for both LEDs. So for the warm and cold white LED, the driver makes that right translation.
Yeah.
And you expect your luminaire to remain the same color if you dim it all the way down to 0. And if you dim it, for example, to 50% and all of a sudden tune your color from warm to cold, you expect the brightness to be the same. And that is not so natural as we're speaking about it as of today.
It comes back to the painters, right?
It comes back to the painters. And that's why we have that LightShape technology integrated into that LED driver.
So LightShape is taking out that complexity of the system.
LightShape enables you to tell the driver the data of the luminaire in such a way that the driver can translate that language from Casambi into the right drive current.
So LightShape is not another driver, it's something that's the technology inside the driver.
It is a technology inside the chip of the driver that makes that translation. And for a single channel driver, the only translation you make is dim.
Okay,
but
so
that's easier.
So let's take a look at how does that data get into the driver, right? And what data do I need to define for that?
On the left, you see the LED driver. Normally, you program the driver in a certain drive current. That luminaire comes with lumen data and CCT data, color data of the luminaire. By bringing in all that data into the driver can correctly calculate the right drive current in such a way that the driver can more or less predict the LED output based on the data that's been provided by LightShape. And that's something you do when you're configuring the driver before you're connecting them to the actual luminaire.
So I need to know that data, right? And I have to look that up to get in the end with the painters the right values.
Yeah, and that data can be in the data sheet, the data can be on the label of the luminaire, the data can be within the company, anywhere. That data is always available.
You must have that data.
But you need that data. And if you don't have the data, you need to measure it and act according to measurements.
So, and the data gets programmed in the driver with our programming software called FluxTool.
Indeed. The driver has two outputs. You need to define which one is the warm white and which one is the cool white.
Yeah.
That's something you need to do as first. Then you need to
tell the define that yourself.
Yeah, you can freely define it yourself. Then you need to tell, hey, I'm using this LED, which is, for example, 2700 Kelvin, and I'm using this LED, which is, for example, 6500 Kelvin. Both colors comes with a brightness, a luminous flux in general, which is linked to the drive current that you're programming the driver to. And if you then program that data into the LED driver, you also need to tell the driver what you expect from a system perspective. And that system perspective in this case is the Casambi application.
Yeah.
So if you expect the Casambi application to tune between 2800 to 2900 all the way up to 5900 Kelvin, and you expect the brightness to be constant on all color levels, you need to provide that into the LED driver as well. And then you're done from a driver perspective.
So again, just to repeat, right? So the LED engine values are the actual values of my data sheet of my LED.
Yeah, or luminaire data.
The system values is what I, in the end, want to have, what I want to have visible in my space.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And there is a reason for doing it. And we will explain that later on why you want to do that.
Yeah. So, well, that's call it the driver data. But how do I know in the end that the Casambi side will work the same, will match those values, right?
Christian will touch on what Casambi is offering on their backend and in their configuration portals. But in essential, you only need to know the minimum color temperature and the maximum color temperature that you want to achieve. And those should match to what the driver is expecting.
So on the left, I again have those values from the FluxTool on the eldoLED side, and those have to match the values in the profile on the Casambi side.
On the Casambi side, indeed, yeah.
If those are not the same, you don't get the consistent behavior.
No, then your slider is not matching with the LED output that you.
It will work.
It will work, but it will never get the right color. Yeah, indeed.
So just put that in perspective, right? Underneath each other. So again, my LED engine values are here. So I put that driver data in there. And then I have the control side, which has the same basically range from a warmth to coolest values to control on site.
Yeah, the end user will never notice that the LED values are different from the Casambi values. But there could be reasons for doing it. Because of your warm white channel of your LED is really amber and you don't want that amber appearance from your luminaire. Or the cold white is too cold for a typical application. So you don't want an end user to run in that ice white environment. So the OEM can define that path. And that's the translation that LightShape is making between Casambi controls and the actual luminaire. And that's what we see here on the screen indeed. Next to that, the application is ensuring yourself that the brightness remains the same, even when the LEDs, the two different LED colors, are having a different brightness. Because 100% cold white gives you more lumens than 100% cold, 100% warm white. And an end user expects it to be equal. And that's what LightShape is taking care of. And they take out all the complexity there by just programming it into the driver.
Very good. So that brings us to the end of the eldoLED part, right? Where, well, coming back to these painters, where the 4 different colors of purple were completely different. They were completely off. With LightShape, you basically make sure that you create that same color and same lumen consistency over the range from luminaire to luminaire.
Yeah, because the painters did not know the expectation what to get when mixing their paint. They could not achieve the same color. But if they all have a reference, what kind of color was expected, they could mix it all in the same way in such that the result of the paint is giving that exact same color as expected by all of the 4 painters. And that's in the end, the comparison between the painters and what LightShape is doing.
Very well. You explained it good to me, Stefan. So that brings us back to Christian to add the Casambi story to that.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you. That was very comprehensive information so far. I'll start sharing my screen and we will look at what the next steps are once you've actually picked the LED driver, you've got the LED, you've got all the system components and you've done the configuration, then essentially what is next? And that relates first to, is my screen sharing? Yes, fantastic. Yeah, then as mentioned previously, so there is actually 2 options that you have here. You can first pick to have the integrated solution, which comes from eldoLED, which is at the top diagram here, or you can do the other option, which we have our CBU ASD unit, and you can connect that to, for example, a DALI Type 2 driver. Then typically the next consideration that we would really stress the importance of when considering and integrating Casambi is to really look at the unit placement and to ensure thorough testing. And this is because, as most of you are probably aware, Casambi is built on Bluetooth Low Energy, and it's an automatic forming mesh when you create the network. And obviously with a mesh, you want to ensure that there's strong connection between all the devices. With Casambi, obviously the intelligence is within each node, but you obviously still need all the nodes to be able to communicate together. And with that, you need to ensure that the communication range and the distance testing is done adequately. Obviously, it's Bluetooth Low Energy, so it's 2.4 gigahertz radio frequency. And as with any radio frequency, it can be affected by the surroundings, by other materials. And with this, we have quite a lot of documentation that we can offer to you just to ensure that the correct procedures have been done in place, and also to ensure the correct testing is done. As additional information, I mean, on our specification data sheets, we tend to see typical ranges up to 30 meters. You can get indoors, and for outdoors, we say around 50 meters. But obviously, if you're going to put a metal sheet in between 2 nodes, or you're going to place your CBU ASD unit within inside a full metal luminaire, then the range will be significantly affected. And this is something that we want to really stress the importance of, that testing can never be done enough. And with this, it's also good to remember, on our website, we have plenty of materials that you can look at, plenty of documentation on how to do this, but also typically to ensure testing luminaire to luminaire, And this is purely because if you're testing between mobile devices, for example, if you use maybe your iOS Apple device, then typically the Bluetooth signal will be a lot stronger. The connection will be a lot stronger from that phone device to your Luminaire. So it may be able to be absolutely fine that you can actually talk to it. You can dim it as normal. But then when you take the phone out, you set up all the network, then you might get some issues in terms of the range. So we will always stress that it has to be tested from node to node, and that is Luminaire to Luminaire in this case. So once you've done that, with Casambi, obviously you have not just a control solution, but you have a true ecosystem of partners that are all working in conjunction with each other and really providing a full solution that's not just based on the lighting control. There is other aspects. And obviously, if we're looking towards human-centric lighting, then it's all about how can we influence daylight into and incorporate into the design. And with that, there is other areas that can also be considered and that must be taken into account as well. So with that, obviously this is a Casambi hosted webinar, so you probably have some information already on what Casambi is and how we operate. But in short, it's really a true ecosystem that is built around a number of different players, the full value chain of players that we see. And this is all the way from, for example, with eldoLED in the component manufacturing, all the way up until the end where we have the units in the field and you've got your commissioning agents, for example, which I will touch upon in the next slide. But as you can see on the screen, this is by no means the only two types of partners that we're working with. We have a full global sales network. We have service partners operating, and we're also working with companies who are involved in data and IoT solutions and really bringing out the full capabilities of your lighting control solution and the Casambi ecosystem that you have within your Luminaire. I've done a screen grab here. This is by no means the full complete list. This is constantly growing. We have some Luminaire manufacturers on here, but what we really are is the full ecosystem where it's the technology enabler, where we want to ensure that we have the manufacturers, the industry leaders actually developing on top and with Casambi and really driving the market forward. So that if you choose Casambi for your Luminaire or for the control solution in the projects, then you've got access to a full range of ecosystem providers that can really create that full project requirements as they're needed. So in brief, if we're looking towards Casambi and we're looking at, okay, how does everything piece together and what's the main benefits that I would have for picking Casambi with my Luminaire? And really what you've got here is Casambi is ensuring that you've got the user experience at the core of the design. And this is really throughout the board, whether you're integrating it into your Luminaire, whether you want to use the Casambi application to program the devices, or whether you want to just be flexible and just dim the lights up and down. It's coming from a different standpoint where the user is really at the forefront of everything that we're doing. Coupling that forward, if you put Casambi with the ASD, or if you use eldoLED's integrated range, then actually then you've got a full sort of smart Luminaire, and it's really adding value into that Luminaire package. And certainly today, when we're looking at all the different mega trends that we're seeing in the world, it's how do you differentiate from other competitors, and being able to actually provide that lighting control solution as part of your Luminaire. Not only is it sort of that smart setting that you have, but you also enable yourself higher margins. You can actually take some revenues on top of just your Luminaire component, and you can actually provide the lighting control solution into the project. Whereas typically you would have another company probably coming in and maybe wiring the system and providing the head end. Obviously with Casambi, that's not needed. So it's all wireless. You've got all the intelligence within each of the nodes, and you don't have any additional sort of features or hardware components that need to be added to really create that system. So it's a truly flexible system in that way. I briefly touched upon the ecosystem. So the other manufacturers that you have, there is hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers. You can see them listed on our website at casambi.com/ecosystem. But there really is everything that you can find to really fit the requirements of the project. We've got industry leaders who are really capable and competent in their respective regions, and they're the ones who are integrating Casambi into their portfolio. And with this, it's, as we know, humans' needs are constantly changing and evolving as we move forward. And maybe what's relevant for today may not be so relevant in the future, or people's minds change and they want something different or something additional. With Casambi, obviously, we have a full, flexible and future-proof solution here, where you've got a standardized hardware and firmware across all range of manufacturers. So you can pick and choose freely, you're never locked to one manufacturer, and you can ensure that in 2 or 3 years' time, when you want to upgrade your system, you want to add more functionality as Casambi improve our system, then you've got the over-the-air update capability. And this is really fundamental, that Casambi, at its core, we're able to respond to the market needs as quickly and as necessary as possible. Moving a bit sort of deeper into the ecosystem, and if we're looking maybe specifically for human-centric lighting, then as I mentioned, it's also about how do you enable daylight and how do you interact with daylight in the buildings. And this is where we have the real sort of the strength of the ecosystem come out to play here, because Casambi as a technology provider, then we have the real sort of manufacturers building upon this. And for example, you can have blind shutters, which is one example in the bottom left here, but we also have multiple types of sensor manufacturers. So you can have, for example, a sensor which is integrated directly into your Luminaire. You could have a high bay sensor, you can have really a battery operated sensor. There is multiple options to choose from and multiple manufacturers to choose from. I'll talk a bit later about, okay, where did these products come from and how can you really get them into a project? But for the meantime, it's just good to note that there is a constantly evolving ecosystem of partners that are really developing through different and new products. I've also put in the bottom right here is different type of switch components, because obviously human-centric lighting, it's all about how the users and how do the occupants interact with the lighting system. So you could have the one option, you could have a full autonomous system. So you could have just a daylight sensor going into the project, where ensuring you maintain X amount of lux according to the daylight that's coming into the room. Alternatively, you may find that the occupants would like to be able to have that customization, that flexibility to control the lights above their desk, for example. Then they can use the Casambi application, or then you can have switches which can be placed wherever you like across the room in multiple different manufacturers. You could have batteryless switches, or you can have battery powers or mains powered, and you've got the full ecosystem available to choose from, which is on our website. So the manufacturers themselves, we have a huge, well, as we mentioned, a partner network, and how this, I maybe want to focus maybe a bit more on, is really our routes to market, and how do these ecosystem products end up in the field, and through which channels do they come through? And this is one area where we have a strong value-added reseller network, and you can see on the right there, it's really a global network that we have, and these value-added resellers, what the main responsibility as such is to really have not only the Casambi units, so the CBU ASD, for example, that we mentioned, or some of the other express switch maybe, but actually to have a combination of sensors, of switches, of relays, of different materials that you would need to really fulfill that full project requirement. And on top of that, they can provide the full sort of customized service to ensure that you have the correct parameters set, as Mark and Stefan rightly mentioned previously. Good to mention here, so obviously if you choose the integrated option from eldoLED, then they will come pre-programmed, and you will get that in-house branding service as such, so that when you design it into the Luminaire, you've got your branding visible within the application. But if you choose the CBU ASD route through some of our partners, then also you can get that service through our value-added resellers, and that doesn't have to be completed by yourself. It can be provided to you. In addition to that, we have sort of project design and management support. So we've got these local value-added resellers, predominantly one in each country. In some countries, we've got more, but they're really there to ensure that if there's multiple manufacturers, for example, in a project, that it can actually be handled and managed effectively well altogether. And not only that, but to provide the support and the after sales service. So once you've actually delivered all the project, that they can come in at the end and say, hey, look, okay, we'll make sure that everything's running as accordingly. We can come in 6 months, we can come in 12 months, or we can even ensure that the client handover and the training is done by our team. So it doesn't even have to be done individually by yourselves. Taking that one other sort of step further, we have built up, and actually I'm here in the facility at the moment, although unfortunately due to Corona, it's been closed for a while. But certainly, hopefully, when the restrictions allow, we've got a certification course that we offer directly here in Casambi headquarters. So we have multiple training walls set up with 40 to 50 devices within each wall, where it's a 2-day examination where we ensure that it's a pass and fail test. So everybody that completes it successfully is then listed onto our website and can be identified as a commissioning partner locally in their region. So that if there is a project where you have multiple manufacturers, and like mentioned, if you have 5 devices in a residential home, then it's very easy. You can use the application, you can set it up, and you can pretty much get go. But if you have maybe 100 devices, you've got sensors, you want to use daylight harvesting, you want to use other settings in cooperation, then obviously then we have a bit more complexity, and it does need to be considered a bit from the outset. And this is where the commissioning partners can come in and really provide that service to ensure that the project is fulfilled as the design intent was intended. Directly from Casambi, if we look, so the previous slide was more on our partners and what services and capabilities they can offer. If we're looking directly from Casambi, what we really want to stress and to get across is that actually even if you purchase an eldoLED integrated driver and you go to market and you want to promote Casambi into one project, or you want to input Casambi to a project, that Casambi ourselves, even though we're not directly selling any units to you as a lighting manufacturer, we're actually there for support. And there's multiple different channels that you can actually utilize to ensure that you've got the support needed, and not only from us, but also from the eldoLED team and your local sales partners as well. So the first thing I would probably like to highlight is the training facility. So this is what I just mentioned here, where we undertake the commissioning certification. That's by no means the only course that we have available. There is currently 3 offline courses here at the facility. It's offered free of charge, and anybody can come and join and sign up. The first 2 are over 2 days, and you get free lunch included as well, and it will cover predominantly the basic aspects to what you would need to consider for Casambi in terms of the whole system setup and the whole architecture as well. In terms of online training, this was a real requirement due to the current COVID situation that we have, unfortunately, which has been good because we've had a really high turnout and the material is constantly getting updated. There's 2 online courses that you can sign up for at the moment, and you can take them leisurely at your own pace. You don't have to do them module by module. You get access, I believe, for 2 days, so that you can take it. It doesn't have to be set and sat down for 1 hour, for example. But we also have YouTube videos online that you can look at maybe the main aspects of how to group and network, or how to dim according to X amount of lux, for example. In addition to this, we also have our Casambi sales team. So we have really expanded quite heavily over the last 2 and 3 years. We have predominantly in Europe and in Northern America at the moment, where we can offer localized trainings directly from Casambi and our sales team. If you're further afield, obviously with Corona, we can very easily do that via online and via Teams as well, so that we can ensure that your sales team is up to date in what they need to know to really sell the Luminaire and the controls package together, because typically that may be a new concept that needs to be taken into account. So we're more than happy to support in this too. The next level is the Casambi technical team. We've got a team of 7 persons strong here in North America and in Finland in our headquarters. They can be reached directly at support@casambi.com. We also have within the Casambi application itself the remote diagnostics and feedback. So if any of your potential end clients get a bit stuck with some of the system settings and maybe something has changed, we can actually see what the settings are. We can offer the remote support and even the remote changes in some instances as well. One of the latest developments that we're actually having is this Casambi Online specification success team. And this is really to build up the support and the documentation that is necessary to actually go into a project and really specify Casambi as part of your luminaires. And this is something that's really within the Casambi strong focus at the moment, and we're looking to develop into these areas. So with this, I would like to give a short recap, and maybe I'll hand over here to Mark and Stefan in terms of the learning points and what we've covered up to date. Then I will go into the Q&A session. So please fire your questions in as you come through, and we will ensure to get to them after this slide.
Yeah, so thank you, Christian. So again, right, so we looked at what drivers do you need, right? So what kind of driver do you need to do this application, but also what type of radio can I select to build it?
Exactly.
So next to that, we went through the LightShape parameters. So what is LightShape, and how do I program it, and how do I make sure that there is a consistency towards the Casambi system?
The better your LED data, the better your end result. So the more accurate the data that you gather from either the data sheet or actual measurements from the Luminaire, the more actual the data is into the drop that is being programmed into the driver, the more accurate your result will be. And even the smallest tolerances between typical datasheet values and actual measurements can make a huge improvement from a Casambi appearance in relation to the light that you actually get when setting the right color. So that's definitely a takeaway that you need to take into account, that the more accurate the data, the more accurate the result.
Thank you, Stefan. So that touched also on the designing of accuracy and consistency, and the programming and matching those two systems together for a successful human-centric lighting application.
Yeah, especially from an eldoLED perspective, everybody thinks about programming the driver, but some customers forget that the radio module should match the settings in the driver.
These values.
Because they think that it is matched automatically, but it's matched in the Casambi application if it's set correctly in the Casambi profile. So you need manually, you need to match those profiles. So you need to make sure that those match before you ship them into the field.
So Christian, maybe you can point out the last two bullets on the slide from a learning perspective.
Yeah, and just from a learning perspective, just to recap what I mentioned in the sense that obviously it's a radio frequency that we're using here with Casambi. It's Bluetooth Low Energy, it's 2.4 gigahertz, and that the surroundings do affect the range. It's a mesh network, so you really want to ensure appropriate testing. We have multiple documentation available for that online. When you do go through that process, we'll ensure that we've got the support for you to make sure how you can optimize it or what considerations need to be in place there. Then moving forward into what the Casambi partner ecosystem is, and really just making aware that we've got a wide ecosystem partner network here that can really be utilized. And it's not just on the component level or the lighting control level here, but we're really expanding. You've got data IoT, you've got the future upgradability, and you've got the future proofness of a system as well.